When the time between disclosure and weaponization has collapsed from like weeks to hours, why do cadence-based programs break down?
Even when they were deterministic systems that you had built and coded yourself, it's still kind of a scary thing. And so to gain that confidence, it had to be very, very predictable. So remove predictability. Well, guess what? Now it's even scarier.
The ability to kind of absorb this Vulnpocalypse or whatever you want to call it, how are you seeing security leaders frame that response right now?
Once you unlock AI, anything that's halfway done is going to go horribly wrong. Like, there's just no way around it.
What does good look like when it works? Moving from visibility to actionability, taking action or being in a position to take action.
Your first lines of defenses must be not 80%, but as close to 100 as possible.
Thank you for joining the Resilient Cyber Show. My name is Chris Hughes, and today I'm joined by Ivan Dwyer. Ivan, thanks for being here.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, likewise. I was talking to you about your background a little bit, with Axonius and before that. But for folks that don't know you, don't know the team, can you tell us a bit about yourself as well as the Axonius team?
Sure. I'll start with Axonius. I'm Ivan. I'm product strategy at Axonius. If you're not familiar with us, we are the leading AI platform. And by AI, I mean asset intelligence. Sorry, I have to do that joke every time. It is so dumb, but I crack myself up. Really, though, we focus on two things. We focus on all of your cyber assets and all of your exposures. So across every system, every tool, every application, we do the hard work to reconcile those, deal with all the nitty-gritty nuances, and then serve up decision-grade context, the thing you need to really take action downstream. It could be for incident response, posture management, vuln management, or just everyday security and IT operations. Now, why is that important? Because, well, I'm sure we're going to get to it in this conversation, but in the coming times, and it's always been there, but everything depends on having all the right context. So we really act as that context layer and do all that hard work. I've been here, Axonius, about 2 years now, product strategy, been in security for about a decade, did a lot of work in cloud infrastructure and developer tooling before that. Did 5 years at Okta, and now here I am, happy to chat.
Yeah, likewise. I'm very familiar with the Axonius team. Dean, I guess I'd say former CEO at this point, but an amazing leader. You all have had an amazing run and really a name in the industry, to be honest with you. I imagine most everyone's familiar with Axonius to some extent now. But, I wanted to start with, kind of the topic of the hour, right? Cloud Mythos, everyone's top of mind, this whole Vulnpocalypse narrative, like the Cloud Mythos and MVD pullback, kind of happening within a week of each other. And today, they've kind of fundamentally changed the math on exploitation windows. So I'm curious, from your perspective in the Axonius team, when the time between disclosure and weaponization has collapsed from weeks to hours, why do cadence-based programs break down? And what's the mindset shift that security teams need to make to kind of operate in this new tempo?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, it's wild times. There's certainly a lot has been said in the last few weeks. So, I hope we can get this conversation going to, what's really left to say. I would say, thankfully, the news cycle has also compressed as well. I think we've actually managed to run an entire hype cycle in just a matter of a few weeks. So I feel like here we are at the right time. It's that proverbial plateau of productivity, as Gartner says. So, teams are asking what really changes. Now, I'm biased on the asset side of the house, but I really think there's one major change that I see that feels just like crazy vindication for everything that Axonius is built on. But it's just one of those in-your-face problem solution fits. Now, for as long as, you and I and everyone's been in cybersecurity, just this notion of having an asset inventory, it's always been baseline. It's always been table stakes. Actually investing in asset management as a discipline, it always sat on that okay, that's nice to have. We've got periodic patch cadences. We can kind of handle the vulnerabilities that come in. We get some information from here over there. It's painful to reconcile, but you could always justify that reconciliation because things were just kind of periodic, right? It wasn't incident response. It was, the more, okay, we've got some time to do some proactive security. All right, it was an easier breath to take than the incident response. But guess what? Now everything is incident response, right? And so this notion of periodically running patch exercises, periodically doing threat hunting, everything is now continuous. Everything is dynamic. So this idea of spending time to do reconciliation, I think is out the window, right? And so we focus on that kind of baseline asset. And the reason why we call it asset intelligence and not an inventory is because of everything that is dynamic about it, right? It has to be complete, it has to be accurate, it has to be up to date. So you've got some information over being reported from one tool, you've got some information being reported from another tool. It's really hard to do that work. And like the company's been around for 7+ years now. Like all of that time has been spent on that reconciliation, that really hard part. And now we feel like, hey, this is kind of our moment, right? Like teams actually legitimately need, this is a must have. So we're really focused on that baseline and getting everybody grounded in truthful context. And then of course, everything that follows downstream, there's just a lot of work to do, right? Like, and everybody kind of knows, wow, this is the speed and the volume of things have really accelerated here. The good news, I think, is that if you actually kind of take a moment to pause and think about it, the work hasn't changed that much. I mean, some of it has, all right? But really, like the fundamentals are really important again. And, that was actually one thing that I thought was kind of funny. Like, like everybody else, I walked into RSA, kind of like, okay, here we go. This is going to be just AI nonsense all day long. Like hide my badge, don't make eye contact. Like that was kind of my plan going into RSA. But I felt really good about the conversations I was having. And like one of the most common takeaways was everybody was talking about the fundamentals again. Everybody was talking about that. The fundamentals have changed and they were never basic, but I think everybody kind of realized with all this speed, with all this volume, like we can't ignore preventative measures anymore. Like we just can't do it. Like the first lines of defense are extra critical. Of course, we have to go deal with the the Vulnpocalypse and the volumes of stuff. But like, let's actually think about the preventative measures we can start to take. And that feels like a welcome, kind of refreshing kind of perspective on this versus the like, it's doom and gloom, everywhere. So long answer. I'll pause, let you share some of your perspective. But yeah, that's kind of at least what I'm seeing from.
I think it's spot on. A few things you said there jumped out to me is like, asset inventory or asset intelligence. I like the framing of how you put that because it is always changing. That's what makes it so challenging, right? It's like this fundamental critical security control that we all know we've had to do at hardware, software asset inventory for years and or decades. But it's always like lived in spreadsheets and different systems, and like it's never entirely accurate or up to date. And it's the age old, you can't protect what you can't see, right? And we all know that phrase, but no one ever has a good inventory, especially not, in the context of how you frame it of asset intelligence. And then the fundamental aspect of, like you talked about, the fundamentals are kind of cool again, is so accurate because I put up I've been reading different publications, right, from the organizations of like how to build an AI-ready vulnerability management program, right, things like that. And you read it, and it's like microsegmentation, patch management, asset inventory. And you're like, wait, this is just like the things that we should have already always been doing. But now you have to do them at a kind of a speed, a cadence, as you said, that we've never had to deal with before. So it's a good framing of that. And I think it kind of highlights that, like, you can't outrun the basics. You have to do the basics, and you have to do them exceptionally well. And so I wanted to ask you too, like, boards are starting to ask, I feel like when I have these conversations with security leaders, like boards are starting to ask, harder questions around not just security, but resilience, right? And the ability to kind of absorb this Vulnpocalypse or whatever you want to call it. How are you seeing security leaders frame that response right now? And does it actually unlock, a new budget or any budget growth, or is it shaping up to be kind of a do more with less? Like how are you seeing it play out?
That's a good question. I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, boards are going to ask the reactive question, and there's like two flavors of advice you could be listening to right now. There's one side, if you're listening to, let's just say the frontier model companies, right? They're basically like, oh, security. Okay, step one, draw 2 circles. Step 2, draw the rest of the owl. And you're like, okay, that's not very helpful. But then you have like the CSA putting out like actual really tangible guides of like, okay, like you said, the fundamentals. A lot of this stuff is very familiar. What changes? I think the question really comes down to, I mean, resilience is one of those words that's been around for a while. It means different things to different people. But like, it's, there's the recoverability of it, but like, yeah, I mean, how actually exposed are we? Can we actually recover when something bad happens? I think the things that boards don't want, they don't want to be surprised, right? And I feel like when everything feels like it's new and scary and dangerous, the boards see that as, I'm going to get surprised in the next meeting. And that's a little different than show me your risk posture, which they've, ignored that conversation for years. Like, it's just kind of probably the third bullet point on the last day, hour of the meeting, like, okay, we got to talk about security again. But now it's like, all right, are we going to be surprised this quarter, this month, this year? Please tell me no. And answering that question is a different kind of mode of operations, because it kind of goes back to the best thing you can answer in that is you don't know what you don't know, but we're not, we at least have the awareness and the plans to recover if we have to. And I think one of the things that also has changed, we talked, like you said, like visibility has always been the thing. You can't protect what you can't see. Visibility just kind of feels like, okay, we've got the dashboards, but awareness, like I have total awareness of my environment. So I'm not going to get surprised if something does happen. We have an operating plan put in place. Now that's hard to have a board level conversation. It depends on the makeup of your board. But that kind of resilience is more about, I think, awareness and less about, we did all this work to get all this visibility and we put these teams in place to do all these things, because that's the same board conversation that has probably glossed over everybody's eyes for years now. So, I mean, I don't sit on boards, thankfully. I probably would be terrible in that conversation. But I think, our customers are coming to us because their boards are asking those questions as well. And we just try to frame the conversation again because of where we sit as that reconciliation layer is effectively like, what does it mean to have total awareness of your environment? Now, I would not say this to a board, but I like to say this to security professionals. It's like those 80s video games that you used to play, and there was always the map, right? And the map didn't illuminate until you visited the screen. And after you visited every screen, you had the full map. And once you had the full map, you were way more capable at that game, right? I feel like that's how we should treat the attack surface, is do everything you can to illuminate the map, because in, day-to-day operations, whatever's coming, whatever you actually have to do, if you can see everything again, right, like actually have the full awareness, then you're going to be a lot more effective. But
yeah, no, I think it's spot on. Like, being in a position, like you said, visibility is a first step. But, I think this is something you've written about, and I've kind of spoken about before too, is like visibility is that critical first step of you framed it as like illuminating the map for those of us that remember the 80s video games. But, there's also the need to bridge from visibility to actionability. And I think that awareness is what puts you in a position to actually, take actions, right? Where do you see most programs getting stuck of, having the visibility, and what does, what does good look like when it works, moving from visibility to actionability, taking action or being in a position to take action?
Yeah, we've been championing this notion of actionability at Axonius for a while now, right? And it really is, it is meant to step out of just the status quo of we have the visibility into, okay, we need to be empowered to do the things that we need to do, right? And there's, a lot of things that touches. That touches every cyber program. It touches every business program as well, really. And I think the things that have been, holding back teams, I mean, and you probably see this. I mean, even before AI, just like the idea of running large-scale automation is scary in security contexts. Even when they were deterministic systems that you had built and coded yourself, it's still kind of a scary thing. And so to gain that confidence, it had to be very, very predictable. Okay, so remove predictability. Well, guess what? Now it's even scarier. But, I think the idea now is, can we assemble the right, and we use this framing decision grade a lot when we talk about asset intelligence, right? Like, if the output of all of that visibility isn't decision grade, then there's no step to actionability. So the output of everything that you're doing on the visibility side of the house, it has to reach this decision grade point. And that decision grade point has to be directly tied to some action that you need to take. And those actions, they range from a lot of different things. But I mean, if you're, automating a large scale patch, if you're, containing a compromised account, if you're running an actual remediation flow from end to end, right? All of those different actions, they have some form of mobilization tied to them. And like, there's no one size fits all, I think, here. Like, I think there's this nice dream of, self-healing environments where everything is fully automated. But I think the more reality is like, okay, we have a decision point to make here. And from that decision point, okay, that thing, all right, we want to go coordinate across the teams. Maybe we got to go talk to IT before we actually touch anything. This one, oh, fine, let's just go flip the switch, turn the knob. Okay, this one, let's at least have, maybe some guardrails, like some checkpoint here. And if you get really good at the just like decision framing, all of those kind of downstream kind of mobilization playbooks. If you feel good about the context, right, then that's what you can really start building. Well, you don't want to get stuck building the context like that, and that takes enough time. Like, so if you spend all your time building the context, you're not going to spend the time building the action side of the house. So I think like we try to remove the need to build the context and just focus on those downstream efforts. If you know, like, okay, I know the owner of this asset, I know the owner of the remediation, I understand the impact, those types of things. If that enters your decision framework, then maybe you can start to feel more comfortable running automation or even letting agents take over. Who knows?
Yeah, I think it sounds funny because it's like, that's none of that stuff you laid out is like the shiny stuff of who owns the asset, what's the business context, like all these, but organizations spend an inordinate amount of time pulling together all that context and just to even get to a point of being able to make a decision, to your point. And that's not their core competency, right? It's like the security team's there to mitigate organizational risk or empower the business to make risk-informed decisions. But to be able to make those decisions, to get to the actionability point you talked about, you need all that context. And one of the ones you talked about there was business impact. I'm curious, like when, from Axonius' perspective and your time there and, your time in prior roles too, like given this kind of AI narrative of, the massive attack surface, the disclosure and exploitation, volume and velocity, like how should teams be measuring business impact when they decide what to fix, right? In what order? What signals are kind of most underused that they should probably consider more?
Yeah, this is a good one. And this has always been hard. Like if you go back in time, I always joke, like every data classification project has gotten halfway done and then abandoned because people are like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. This is terrible. Every tagging, like we're going to tag every asset in our cloud environment. You get halfway done and you're like, oh my God. Every time you try to write policy as code, you get halfway through, right? So that's still there, right? Like it's just hard to get whatever it's tagging, whatever the labeling of what is important to the business, right? And so this is actually, I think AI is going to be really helpful here because I think AI can look and infer a lot of these things. It's connected to your CMDB. It's connected to your identity provider. It's connected to your cloud provider. Like, okay, it's connected to every tool in your system, right? It can probably infer a little bit of criticality. Can infer importance to the business. Okay, this is a production workload. It's running like large scale workloads. We're getting a ton of network traffic over here, so this is probably important. Okay, that app over there, that's the internal lunch menu. Like that's fine. Like don't worry about that. So right now, I think, and this is still early, but I do think that AI is going to get really good at understanding the nuances of the environment, provided again it has all the context to make those decisions. Because the idea of manually entering every important workload in your CMDB, manually tagging every EC2 instance across AWS, manually classifying every piece of data across your enterprise. Again, you're gonna get halfway there, and you're like, once you unlock AI, anything that's halfway done is gonna go horribly wrong. Like, there's just no way around it. Like, everything has to be critical mass, otherwise, just don't let AI touch it. So that I feel like could be a big area of change here. And then I think the second thought I was having on this, right? Like, and this is kind of looking at the AI news and just is some of the kind of discourse around here. Like, okay, let's all agree the frontier models are awesome at software. Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, we got Dario is out there basically saying, guess what? Software is solved. The cost of software is going to zero. I mean, he's not talking about the cost to Anthropic. But that is beside the point. Let's just say the cost of software is going to zero. So you play that out, for the sake of argument. If the cost of software goes to zero. So now what? The business is competing on product, experience, distribution, trust, like all of those things. So the security parallel here, right? So let's just say the cost of discovering software vulnerabilities, writing exploits, and writing fixes, again, hypothetically, that just goes to zero. What are we competing on? We're competing on speed, sure. But also, like, just the entirety of the same people process technology that has made up security organizations for decades. So I think that matters a lot when you look at certainly like exploits as a chain, not just the software vulnerability part about it, but even if that's getting all the headlines, but looking, across, again, the entire environment, understanding impact, understanding reach, right? Like the stuff we've been talking about for decades now, because I think it becomes a little extra critical, certainly when you're dealing with the volumes that we're going to be dealing with. But not everything is just about the software vulnerabilities. Like I think that's an important takeaway. Like all of the, I always like to say, not every vulnerability is an exposure. Not every exposure is a vulnerability. Like you have to just kind of understand all of that. And I think the original question was what signals matter. I mean, like we like to say it's a combination of things. Like so, it's the asset context, it's the business context, and it's the security context. The asset context is the footprint, right? The environment, the total awareness, right? But the security context is everything is happening in real time. And the business context comes from a lot of different places. And I do think that's the hardest piece to unlock in any prioritization scheme that you're coming up with. But again, I hope AI can get good at that, but definitely don't rely on all your manual efforts.
Yeah, no, I think it's true because that's the most unique aspect of it, right? Like each organization, like the vulnerability severity scores and things like that are kind of uniform and standardized. Where the business context is specific to you, right? Like each organization is unique. Their risk tolerance, their asset criticality, what their core competencies, et cetera, et cetera. Like those things are very unique to the enterprise, to the organization, and that's why that's the hard part, right? You can't outsource that. You have to decide, right, what the business criticality is for you. And so I was going to ask you, you threw out the term exposure as well. Given that your role at Axonius, like and you talked about this with the news cycles, the hype cycles, you kind of joked about this, how quickly it's moving. There's been a lot of category convergence over the last 18 months or so, whether it's looking at the categories of CASM, CTEM, exposure management, asset intelligence, like all the acronyms that we love in cyber. From your seat in Axonius, like what's actually different about how mature programs are kind of operating today versus how they were before kind of the hype cycle of AI and LMs and agents and so on.
Yeah, no, and good call. And it always, I mean, I'm in like product marketing. I talk to a lot of analysts a lot, so I deal with all the categories. And part of me is like, it just kills me that we're so category driven, but like also I do get it. Now I think, yeah, like you said, there is a convergence. It's kind of been the last year or so. I mean, even when I first got to Axonius, part of what I was coming in to do was to make sense of a lot of the market forces. And Axonius has done a great job really creating the CASM category. Gartner, we just called it cyber asset management. Gartner was like, no, we need 2 more letters. And we're like, okay. And then it became CASM. And we really drove that forward, but we were smart to recognize that it had a ceiling, right? And again, it kind of goes back to that. If visibility by itself has its value, but it's not the end game here, right? Like you have to take action, you have to push things forward. And so for us, it happened so naturally where our customers, we already had vulnerabilities coming into Axonius. It was just part of the core product. We were just pulling software vulnerabilities. And people were like, hey, I actually kind of want to run my program with you because of your place in the stack where you're collecting from every tool. Like I get all this stuff from my scanners, my CNAPs, like I can look there, but I actually do kind of want to reconcile all of my vulnerabilities as well. And so we looked at that and said, okay, we're also pulling SaaS mix configurations. We have an identities footprint, so we see everything on the identity side. We can bring all this together and really create a unified exposure management kind of solution. Right around that time was when Gartner really started pushing the CTEM framework, so continuous threat exposure management, which I actually really, really like. And I think it's like for everything that we've been talking about, right? So far, the continuous aspect of that is actually it's not a buzzword. It's like it actually has to be that way. And so their framing I thought was really good. But again, that's a program, not like a product area. So what we saw was, okay, there's this notion of there's the entire attack surface. Like we need total awareness of the attack surface, but then we need to connect that to the downstream actions. And exposure management was really the most natural connection to that. Where I actually see things kind of pushing forward, if you're to look at it in a more, I think, less categorical framing and a more, actually jobs to be done framing is really preventative security. Like if you take every posture management category, you take vulnerability management, you take exposure management, This is all, I think, converging into not just proactive security, but actually preventative security. I think it is the right time to really be looking at that, again, for all the reasons that we've discussed. Like, your first lines of defenses must be not 80% good because you passed compliance, but as close to 100 as possible, because every slip in that is going to make the Vulnpocalypse even worse for you. And so I think the framing of preventative security across all these different categories is the right lens. Like, it's not like, oh, we need to go put a posture management tool in this box, and we need to go do cloud security in that box. It's like, okay, let's look at the totality of the environment. Let's look at control coverage across the board. Like, how do we actually maximize this? So I think that's the market direction that we're aiming for, and we launched our exposures product just over a year ago, and it was like such a natural evolution of what we were doing. And so we've really expanded our portfolio, our breadth of offering. So it wasn't, we actually went and like on stage declared Chasm dead as a category, which was a fun thing to do, but also like the meaning behind that was not that like that category failed, but no, it actually accomplished what it needed to accomplish. But hey, guess what? We have a whole new frontier that we have to tackle here. Let's focus on that, get the baseline, and as we talked about, but as you need, but let's focus on the action side of the house. And it just so happens, kind of starts with exposures for us, which touches everything, right? So,
Yeah, no, I actually, we joke about the acronyms, and like there is a lot of reasons to joke about it or make fun of the categories and the acronyms, but I actually am a fan of exposure management as well. I think it's an evolution or maturity of vulnerability management from traditionally how it's been done. And again, it speaks to that continuous aspect that it kind of calls it out by name, which seems trivial, but it's important because it's a big shift in how we approach mitigating organizational risk and managing organizational risk. So I like exposure management as a function to the point of what we've been talking about, of pulling in all that context, doing it continuously, making it actionable. I like that framing, and I think it's a good approach for organizations to move towards from traditional vulnerability management. So we've talked a lot about the basics, right? And why they're so critical and why they're hard, right? They may be simple, but they aren't easy a lot of times. And so that said, these guidance, these publications from CSA and others, they do also add in some level of novelty or new aspect of using AI to kind of fight AI, or using AI to kind of fight Vulnpocalypse, or address some of these challenges of asset intelligence, these different things. I'm curious, like when you look at that, where do you think teams could get ROI of leveraging AI for, asset intelligence, for vuln management, for CTEM, et cetera?
Yeah, just to touch on the fundamentals or not basic point for a second. I think like the thing that makes it, I think, especially hard is the negative space of it, right? Like, like I said, I worked at Okta for 5 years. So, and this like bugged me the whole time I was there. It was an architectural thing. Like, there's Okta as a directory, and then there are connected SSO applications that are connected. And that was the universe to Okta. And we could do anything in that universe. But not every Okta user was in the directory. Not every application was connected via SSO. So in order to get kind of a full awareness of the identity landscape, and startups were built to solve this problem. One of them sold to ServiceNow for $1 billion. It's like you have to zoom out and you have to look across the entire environment. And I think that applies here a lot, because you have like the basics. If we just break it down to all the compensating controls, okay, great. My tool is reporting that everything is healthy and great and 100% covered, but it doesn't count for the negative space. And I think the negative space is the hardest part of getting the fundamentals right. And so that's where we try to say, well, we'll elevate, like we will illuminate the negative space for you. Now, if you get to that context, you get to that decision grade point here, right? This is where I feel like AI is going to do just a ton. And a little bit of it is like, I think, making sense of the environment, making sense of that context, right? Filling in some of those gaps of understanding, so that what actually gets prioritized in that schema is working off of complete information, and it's like, okay, we can infer the owner here because of XYZ reasons. Like, AI is good at that. We can infer the criticality of this workload. Okay, we can trace the entire path of that workload, but AI can say, all right, I think this is pretty important for a variety of reasons, right? And so I think will be really helpful in prioritization engines. Like first and foremost, just making really, making recommendations. It's not taking action yet. So I think and I think this is going to really help teams get probably more comfortable and more confident, and to be able to tune the AI to their environment. Like AI built into all these systems is going to have memory, and it's going to understand the environment over time. It's going to pick up organizational patterns. I think that's just going to help. Like it's just, okay, this is getting smarter. Like you're not going to, drop in an AI tool on day one and just, turn on all the knobs and let it go to town. Like, okay, we're going to roll this out across our tooling here. This is where we feel like we can at least start to bring in AI to start making some recommendations. Like this is the remediation path. This is the impact. This is what you can do. Go click that button, right? But first, like here's the recommendation. Or like, hey, we're not sure what the full remediation path is, but we at least see we can mitigate the damage by doing X, Y, Z, right? Like here's a little bit of containment first. Like I think containment first, I feel like is going to be a big theme once we start teams get a little bit more comfortable with AI. Like the full end-to-end remediation, if that's the North Star, like let's get good at containment first, and let's get good at validation. Let's understand what the impact is, what the reach is, and how exploitable this thing really is. Like AI is going to get pretty good at that. So I think in the CTEM life cycle, right? Like there's all the scoping and discovery, all that reconciliation, like that's like brute force. Like that's just like Axonius has been brute forcing this for years, right? When you get into prioritization, all the validation, all the remediation, okay, now we're taking action. I think AI is going to have a lot to do in that space, but I do think it starts more at the recommendation layer before it turns into something doing the actions, taking actions autonomously.
I would agree with that incredibly well. Like, especially in security, we're very risk averse by nature, and we don't want to have a negative impact on the functionality of the business, right? The operations of the business, or cause a disruption of some sort. So autonomy is going to exist on a spectrum of initially making recommendations and like having a human in the loop. And then I think as we progress to the point we talked about earlier, if it's a non-critical asset, or, it will progress through towards being a little bit more comfortable with autonomy there, all the way up to hopefully full autonomous, remediation eventually. But to your point too, I think AI, where it's going to be exceptionally valuable, as we know, it's really great with data, right? It can pull together a lot of data and help be informative and in that sense. And again, that builds on everything that Axonius has built as a core competency of pulling together all that information of the asset, the criticality, the ownership, all these kind of things. So it can equip the user to be in a position, again, to make an actionable decision grounded in informative, valid data. So I think we've come full circle basically in the conversation in that way. So I guess last question for you before we wrap up. What should folks keep an eye out for with Axonius? Anything to follow the team for? Something coming up? Anything you want to throw out there?
Oh well, we actually have some pretty big news dropping tomorrow. I won't say it, but you'll see a lot of orange, I think, on LinkedIn. If you're watching this live, then it is tomorrow. If you're watching this not live, then maybe you've already seen it. Just a big company milestone that we're super excited about. In terms of what's coming, yeah, I think the exposure management space is really exciting. We're seeing a lot of momentum there. But while we're on a fun podcast, like let's play this out. Maybe past what's immediately coming, and kind of think about the direction of security tooling and kind of security platforms like Axonius. Like, if I were to talk about a product today, it's a powerful toolkit. There's a lot of cool things you can do with it, but it's like a Swiss Army knife for IT and security, right? It just requires some learning and getting really good at it, but there's a very powerful toolkit. But where a lot of folks are driving us, and where we're taking the kind of the vision of the platform is, and it's happening in other parts of software, is the more kind of headless platform, right? Like decision grade context is not just usable in the Axonius platform, right? It's not just viewing dashboards in our platform. It's not just running actions in the Axonius console, right? Decision grade context applies to maybe everything, right? So what we're really focusing a lot of our kind of next efforts on are how do we make that context consumable outside of the Axonius platform, right? So like, the obvious thing is like we're shipping an MCP server with really good insights and really good controls and findings that can be used in any context, right? So hook that into your incident response workflows. You need to know the owner of an asset really quickly, right? Like that's really quick decision grade context. Like we've done all the hard work to get to the truthful answers there. Make that a lot more consumable in other flows. Teams that are building agents to do X, Y, Z, right, can just kind of connect directly to our data. And we feel like, for all the reasons that we've talked about, we have really strong data gravity inside of the platform. And it's nuanced. A lot of it was brute forced over 7 years, but also just like understanding the nuances of environments. Right, like you see a lot of talk around context graphs inside of enterprise organizations. Like, how do you actually make sense of every piece of information in the business and then use that effectively to serve AI tools, right? So like Glean's a great example of a company doing that very well for business teams. Like, hey, guess what? We feel like we're kind of in a similar position where we can do that for security and IT teams. So that's like putting my product vision hat on for a minute, while we're talking amongst friends. But that's I see a lot of interesting things happening. If you kind of look at Axonius as a headless platform and not just a dashboard tool, right? And that's the vision that I'm driving towards.
Super cool. Yeah, I saw some other, it's kind of a trend happening. Obviously, Salesforce was the most notable, like headless kind of vendor in the ecosystem. And I think I won't name another vendor, right? Because we're out here with the Axonius team, but I saw another security vendor do it recently, and I thought that was super cool. So it's exciting to see other security vendors moving in this direction, especially as we see this kind of agentic ecosystem start to emerge and fortify, right? And I'm excited to see where that goes. So Ivan, thanks so much for jumping on with me, man. We run the full gamut of the Vulnpocalypse, asset intelligence, CTEM, everything in between. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was great.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right, cheers.